So there was a blogger. His blog was named Green with a Gun, and he talked about I think it was maybe I can't remember the exact number, but is it the 2,000 ton or 2 ton carbon lifestyle? You can correct me. So he was trying to live within a budget that, okay, I can only take this many trips. I can go on the train every this many times in a year. So that was one way of him trying to live within what he thought was the environmental budget that he had. So he can only eat this much meat. He can only, I mean, it's kind of a very restrictive way to live, but in a way, it's setting limits for oneself, right? Like you can't just gorge yourself on every consumer's thing that's being dangled in front of you if you have some limit like that. So what do you think of that approach
Yeah,
to
I,
dealing with the resources?
I think it's wrong in so many ways, at least two ways. First, it's a very individualized American kind of way that yeah, I
He
will
was
do
from
this
New
much.
Zealand or Australia.
Yeah, yeah, okay, sorry, but it's the same kind of culture, you know. So it's like yeah, me and my friend, we can save everything by not buying plastic bags or whatever. It's kind of crazy. And the other way is crazy is because uh, I thought you were going to talk about the climate budgets that the governments pretend that we have, as a species on this planet, and even those are crazy uh, because what I said in my little presentation. We're way past the point of no return on these things. And the what do you call it? The carbon budget that we made up for the Paris party in 2015 or something. They are based on a willful ignorance of feedback mechanisms, a willful ignoring of methane in the Arctic and stuff, all kinds of things that we keep out of the equation in order to pretend that we still have a budget, a carbon budget, and it's also based on the 2 degrees Celsius warming, fake limit. So all of these things are inside of what I call uh, the narrative rescue operation or whatever. The governments are using an optimistic narrative instead of trying to fix the thing. Yeah.
And what do you think about, you mentioned also that sabotage actions too are not really your cup of tea when you mentioned first debt strike as an example. What would you think about the type of action, for example, described in Edward Abbey's The Monkey Wrench Gang, where people are doing something just because out of love for trees, out of love for a valley, or actions like the guys from Deep Green Resistance who go and occupy a site because they want to protect a beautiful place in North Dakota that's going to be mined. What would be your position on actions of sabotage or blockage of the kind?
Absolutely. Totally in favor of it. And the FBI and CIA and Pinkerton and stuff already know what I've done already, just in my younger years. So we were over in the woods of England in the Newbury bypass action. We were totally being surveyed by, all the time being surveyed by Pinkerton private detectives and stuff. And yeah, some of the greatest people I've met in my life were in those forest actions. So I'm absolutely for protecting, and the more specific it is, like this river with these trouts and this salmon and stuff, just protect it. And like I'm not sure if it's Derek who says it or somebody else, but it's like if we can just protect this river and this species of trout for 5 or 10 more years till the rest of society collapses, then we may have achieved something big, you know. So I'm all for that. The only thing I'm skeptical of is like I don't understand the economy at all, and doing something against the whole economic system just seems very um, muddy or hard to predict for me. So I wouldn't do that kind of thing. And also, I'm a writer, so I'm going to have some pretty hardcore sabotage actions in my upcoming novel. So, but me personally, no, I'm sort of too old and too clumsy to try anything like that. But I won't stop other people from doing it.
But I think you had made a very good description of the debt strike in some expose and meetings with us, and he's a guy who had a great knowledge of economy, and I'm like you, but I forced myself actually because of this tendency to kind of look down on finance and find it boring, and and I've started to understand why using the weaknesses of this system, of this financial system, can bring certain things about that would I don't know if it looking for a result really, but to bring a bit more chaos and the game and a bit more unrest, and it's I think it is a form of sabotage too. Once it's like if you know how an engine works, you know how the financial system work, you know where the weak points are, you know how uh, I don't know, a digger machine works, you know where to put something to stop it from working. I think more along that way without, yes, doing the alien cortex thing where we say, oh, what's happening? Rooting for Marine tonight in the French election. Oh, well, sorry to say, but that horrible Macron is back. So 58%. I just got a message telling me that. So whether that Le Pen or him anyway is nearly the same, but that guy is just so sorry. Yeah. So I was saying that sabotage, yeah, that got um, off track thinking about elections. Yeah.
I think the for anyone who doesn't really conceptualize of finance or whatever very well, you can think of it very much in the same way as the actual physical things that are destroying the trees, like bulldozers or whatever. You can think of it the same way. It's like the engine that runs civilization, if that helps to think of it. The idea of growth is at the heart of debt itself. The only reason growth exists in this world, or the infinite growth paradigm, is because of ever increasing debt, which comes from, a long, long time ago, the start of usury, giving out loans with interest that means that someone then has to go out and make more than you originally loaned to them in the first place, which means growth goes on forever. But yeah, it's like to think about it as sabotaging the financial system is sort of the same way as putting sand into a bulldozer's engine or something like that. And that was the idea behind the debt strike. I thought it was a complete pipe dream because obviously everyone's very, very committed to the chains in their head, right? The idea that I must pay back my debts and all of this stuff. This is so entrenched in our culture. I don't think it's at all possible that one guy making a video would make people completely go against that worldwide. But the idea was still spot on, I think, and yeah,
But the
it
idea
would.
was not to default. The idea was to sow the seed that you could do it, which was
Right.
kind of, giving a doubt suddenly. Oh, it was not actually, and so I think that was psychologically quite clever.
Yeah, and I think that's where it best serves all of us or anyone else who thinks about that, is to just think about it that way, that you don't need to actually pay those things back. They're not right in the first place. So that a whole idea of debt and everything is an illusion. It's basically, modern slavery, and it's the chains in your head that you need to throw off. Um, but yeah, the practicality of it, I mean, I don't see that happening at all. But it's the right. It all ties into the same sort of right way to think about things, I think, because doing that um, is sort of right action without any idea of where it goes. If everyone was to do that tomorrow, no one would have any idea what would happen to the financial markets or the economy at large, or any sort of geopolitical repercussions or anything. But yeah,
Oh yes, Sophia. Yeah. Thanks for that reminder. It was not. Uh, the plot was just to make the threat. So the threat is almost as good as the deed. Threatening not to pay would have shaken the boots of the oligarchs. But I don't think that was fully understood by the audience that Lord Hugh tried to reach. That it was just going to be a threat, and then I could also see where people would be even afraid of just making that threat, like writing a letter to my student loan company saying I plan not to pay starting on November 5. I mean, that's probably scary enough for some people. They'll be on some blacklist, and people care too much about their credit rating. The other thing too is thanks to for reminding us about our intrinsic tendency to repay debts. In fact, there were some videos that Lord Hugh displayed that primates really do keep track of that. Like in terms of, like those, I don't know if they were monkeys, they were trying to get the mites off each other, and they kind of knew who wasn't that doing that to me back. So it's not just, it's really probably very hard to erase in our heads about these debts, because that's how we are as primates, and we've bought into the system of economic debt.
yeah, it's a natural tendency that's been hijacked by people who've used it for their own purposes. So for a long, long time, people have used that idea that you need to pay that debt back, and then added interest on top of that, which is sort of the real icing on the cake when it comes to sort of screwing over, um, population of the world, essentially. Uh, but what was I going to say? Oh, it's sort of the same thing, though. The idea that you are responsible for paying back your debt. You have this uh, accounted for. You have a literal number value assigned to how much you have to pay back and how much you are responsible for and whatnot. That's the exact same thinking behind the carbon budget and things like this. The system tries to make you feel as though you are personally responsible for these actions, for these whatever you owe. Um, you have such and such a personal carbon budget that you are allowed to stay within the confines of, and all of this stuff. It's all ways of putting chains on people, and so to rid yourself of that line of thinking, I think, is imperative for any kind of moving forward in any of this. To not think of yourself as having to account for every little bit of carbon you use on a daily basis or whatever. That's just not the way anyone can function. If you look back at sort of the people who lived harmoniously with nature, no one was doing carbon accounting back then, right? They weren't keeping track of all of this stuff or writing it down on a stone wall or anything like that. The way to live with it is to not use that calculating cost accounting part of your head. That's the key. Yeah, they yeah, they didn't know how to count exactly. Yeah, that's where so many people, I think, go wrong, is they look at this alien cortex problem and they try to come up with an alien cortex solution for it, and it's the wrong way to think about it, I think.
we've been over an hour. Anything else you guys want to add? Any other questions?
Nothing over here. The only thing I would say is I just feel it's not really, and I think most people here are on the same page. But I really don't see any point in talking about things like XR and stuff like that. I view it as a waste of time when it comes to these particular discussions. And there's so much rich stuff that people in this group have in common and can talk about, rather than people who are just doing their own little ego trips for social media and stuff. So I don't know. If there's anything I would say, I'd say that's just not worth even getting into in future discussions. They're not going to do anything. They don't have any real aim other than self-serving ones. So I don't know. I just think we can use this time that we do have to talk about much more important things than that. Yeah, if you're on the Going South says it's only interesting in terms of example of approach. If you're all on the same page that that's just a foolish way of doing things, then you can drop that as a subject, I think. And I think everyone here's on the same page. Just my 2 cents.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, XR is only example of approach, and they did teach us as Hugh also mentioned, that they're fragmented, and we kind of want to, we see that what we want to avoid. So what we see in XR is kind of a warning and something to avoid. So, but yeah, of course, moving forward, I'm sure we'll have other, we have a lot more to talk about.
I was just going to ask if everyone saw the post by Professor Charles, I think Newcols, where he expressed what his area of interest is, which is the Byzantine Empire, and how it was able to survive for 500 years by basically shrinking. So that is another approach society could have if we had enough time, right? How to shrink, and this concept of degrowth. Um, is there even any interest in us talking about those principles, or that movement of degrowth? Or do people think that at this time, the only agency we have is preparing ourselves, as we've been trying to, you know, mentally, spiritually, psychologically? I don't know. I just thought it might be a topic for the future.
Yeah, I agree. We have talked actually about this already, and I think we will approach this subject again and again. I mean, it's crucial. It's much more central than any form of activism that we have talked about there. I'm really sorry, but my dog is jumping on me because he wants to go out. So I'm probably going to have to drop out very soon from the meeting on this. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we could probably explore those topics again, probably also for next meeting. Yeah, Bob saying degrowth, personal in general, degrowth and simplifying our lives are interesting as topics. So yeah, next time we post on Reddit, we can talk about this again. Yeah. So if there's nothing else, we can fall still now, as we did in previous meetings. And we'll end it with Om Paramatmane Nama Iti. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll stop the recording.
Thank you.